somebody was supposed to come moderate, but there's no one moderating, so we have food in the back there for everyone, and if anybody has any questions for Jacob or me, that'd be great. And if you don't, no problem. Right out. Sure, man.
I was staff at United Western.
Oh, wow.
From the 70s until the 80s, till it closed down after Putnam died. So I see you use Studio 3, Studio 2, and Studio 1.
Oh, yeah.
And at one point, that studio was in such disrepair after Cello took it over.
Sure, I remember.
It was Alan Sides, Ocean Way for a while.
Remember it?
Then Cello took it over, but it was in such disrepair, they thought it would never open back up again. And whoever owns it now, East West, they were meticulous. They made sure not to change anything in Studio 1 with all those angled panels.
Sure.
And they were always designed to be moved, and Putnam hit the magic note and never moved them again. So I'm glad that you used the whole facility. And I also saw you use United, which was Ocean Way, the big room. So you used...
Well, the thing about the movie, or one of the things about the movie, is that it's more about the echo than it is about the canyon. And in some ways it's about the echo of people's ideas and creativity bouncing back between them, where they lived and where they worked. But it's also, for us who work in in studios, it's also about the echo. And it's about the sound around the human voice that makes the human voice have, more character, less character, more depth, as you would know, working in those rooms. So one of the things we wanted to do was to film those rooms in a way where you felt the beauty of them as they are to us, just the architecture, and and you could feel the sonic power of them like they once were. I have a fear that because of the revitalization of Hollywood, that those one-story buildings, somebody's going to come in and offer out $50 million to somebody in a studio where Sinatra and Nat King Cole and the Springfield, and that they won't be there in 10 years. So for us, it was like, let's document this place where
I
all the
appreciate
great
how
echo.
true you were, because all of those, a lot of that stuff was done there.
I know that.
Gold Star and Sunset Sound, and
In New York,
made that really authentic.
Well, all we had to do was turn the camera on, put the lights in the right place, because the rest was done by guys who designed the rooms.
I was just wondering, how did the story start? How did you decide? Was it a record, a concert, a documentary?
Well, it started with the record. It started with music, and then as we started listening to the songs and playing the songs, actually maybe with the film that you see portions of throughout with the car, and it made us think about LA a lot in the songs. And it just got more and more exciting as I went, and it occurred to us that maybe there's a movie going on here too. And as fans, I mean, I'm somebody who watches almost all documentaries and reads all those books, and I couldn't think of a definitive documentary that wasn't like a TV special about Laurel Canyon, like a proper movie, that's not that's intercut with concert footage and real stories. And if we were ambitious enough to get some of those people, we might have a real movie.
I started as a rock critic, so this is like a movie for rock critics. I hope there's enough rock critics in America to make have people come to the theater. But the idea of this, when I was growing up in New York, of this idyllic place where people, where the sound of those records represented these pictures of someplace better than the cold concrete world I lived in. So it was always kind of bouncing around in my head, and he and I had gotten to a point in our lives. I had recently left Capitol, which we would call fired, and was wondering what I was going to do. And Jacob's band had just kind of got to one of those transitional places, which we call breaking up. And this movie came on, Model Shop. We were watching it, and it just, in a weird way, it reminded us, you never know where inspiration comes from, an idea for something comes from. And we saw L.A. in these places that we go in this beautiful light by Jacques Demy that he filmed. And so it reminded us of these songs that had that echo, really. When you listen to Brian Wilson and you listen to the Mamas and the Papas. So we just said, I said, hey, let's go listen to these records again. And I said, let's maybe make a record of this stuff. And then when, behind every song is a story. And then we wanted to know the stories behind the songs. And luckily we were able to convince people to tell us the stories. And that became the sort of narrative of the songs being the entry point to the bands and the bands to the life in California.
Thank you.
Sure.
What was cutoff point like pre-Summer of Love?
Cutoff point of the music?
Yeah, it seems like you have a specific point where you see.
I guess really when it becomes about singer-songwriters and the bands kind of all dissolve. Not everybody, people start going separately, and it becomes more about the individual, which is maybe 68, right around there. So everything, and it's, at the end of the film here when Steven Still says it was, what would you say, it was a warning? I mean, it was a warning to Steven, but it was a warning to everybody too that maybe this party was over.
And what about a group like the Doors? Is that just like a different vibe altogether?
That was a little later. I mean, it just...
Again, it's really about that age of innocence, when they all come to California to be like the Beatles, which is what, sort of theme of the film is. There's multiple singers and multiple songwriters, and they come and they want to be in this band. And, the film, in a subtle way, tells you why they broke up. Michelle tells you that she liked Denny, and that caused some problems with that band. And David tells you he was an asshole, and that's why the Birds break up. And, Steven says it was divergent directions. And so for us, it was more about those kind of songs, the Doors and the Sunset Strip Riots, which is 67, and Love. All of that is kind of the next phase. Maybe it's delineated by the drugs changing. In that 65, 66 period, it's probably still cocktail culture and people smoking weed, and then they get into other shit, and it gets California solipsism really sets in.
Two questions real quick, Jacob. Help me with a bet. Did you play at the Santa Barbara Bowl 2000 with Pearl Jam, Jack Johnson, John Frusciante, the Chili Peppers?
No, I did not.
Here's the second question.
I think I played with most. I've not played with the Chili Peppers ever. That's how I can answer that. I've forgotten a lot of things, but I remember that.
You didn't sing with Pearl Jam at the Santa Barbara Bowl?
No.
All right, real quick. How many of these interviews would you say were done in the proximity of Laurel Canyon?
Well, outside of Eric Clapton and maybe John Sebastian. Maybe they were mostly all out here.
They don't live there anymore.
Yeah, don't go up there looking for those people.
So you had to rent houses, huh?
No, Jack, there was a house in Laurel Canyon that Jackson is sitting in front of. It's actually Paul Rothchild's house, and he was the producer of the Doors, and the house is amazing. We wanted to shoot the film in things that would evoke something in the background, obviously with David and the canyon and all of that, and that house in particular just really exemplified that period. And so a friend of ours lives there, so we used it.
I have to ask. I assume you asked Bob Dylan if he would talk about his time when the Byrds recorded his music. And
did we ask him?
Yes.
There wasn't time for everybody.
I knew we forgot something.
Good idea.
I mean, in a sense, it's really about, again, the idea that, as Tom says in the film, the Beatles invented folk rock in California, and about the Rickenbacker, and how, again, that the idea of taking that orchestral 12-string and Roger taking it, and then after seeing George Harrison, and then Harrison taking it and writing If I Needed Someone, and then Brian here, Rubber Soul, and he writes Pet Sounds, and then they write Sgt. Pepper, and that's more of the theme than it is the straight folk rock. Than that one moment when David says in the film that they were playing Mr. Temple.
And I'm very glad you got a nice plug for Warren Zevon in there.
Miss him every day, like I said.
I assume you guys probably met a number of these people over your careers. Is there anybody, Jacob, that you were looking forward to interviewing the most that maybe you haven't met before?
Well, I've been most of them. I don't pretend to know many of them well. I haven't interviewed people before, so we kind of threw me in the deep end to start with Eric Clapton, which I sat on the airplane going there. I'm the interviewer. I'm the interviewer. Why not just start at the top? You know, I felt nervous, probably the most nervous with Brian Wilson. Not just because of his music and his legacy, but, you know, he's maybe a little different than most people that we all speak to. He's very interesting, obviously, and I don't think, some people spend more time making you feel comfortable than other people do.
Did he talk you into cutting that song in the original key?
Did he talk us into it?
Yeah. Or did you go back to your key?
I think we went back to our key, probably. I think in that scene, I think we probably explored the key that, you know, for us, for the record that we were doing, it was just, most important was that we just find keys that work for me to sing. So even though that's a scene with him, I mean, that's an embarrassing moment, actually, that you're playing the man's song in the wrong key. But he also knows as well as I do, like, as singers, we have to find the key that works for us.
So I assume there's an album coming out of the new recording?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
When is that coming out?
May 24th.
And is it the live Orpheum?
It's studio recordings. There's only one thing from the live, but it's all the stuff that you saw in the film. And there's other things. I mean, you know, there's a version of She, the monkey She. We had the monkeys in the film. There was a love song because we felt that they were important. It's the purveyors of garage rock. And but you know, when you're trying to make the narrative of the film, if you start to go into the monkeys thing, it creates like almost an elbow, and you get to that point where you're going, wait, okay, it's 2 hours. We're trying to kind of stay with the narrative, so it wound up on the soundtrack and not in the film.
It was really great, and I loved the way everybody was so open about how they all influenced each other, and even, you know, borrowed from each other, which I think is another meaning for echo. You talked about the studio echo, but I was thinking of the echo for today's musicians, and now Jacob, you and, you know, a lot of now musicians playing this music, revisiting it. Did it echo into your life, and have you been influenced by it?
I always was. I mean, that's music I listened to along with other music growing up. I hope, you know, hopefully a lot of younger people will hear that music for the first time and really get interested in it. But I was already really interested in it.
And all the other musicians that you brought into it, Beck and Nora Jones and all of those other.
Yeah, and if they didn't know specifically, I mean, a lot of those songs are just prevalent anyway. People know them whether they're sure who sang them or not. Those are just, I mean, some people know them from cereal commercials. They're just really popular songs. But once we started playing them, you know, I have just, my mind is very curious, and I was intrigued, not having had the chance before to figure out and learn where the songs came from. But I was already wildly interested in that music.
Was Tom Petty, rest in peace, were you finished with the interviews with him by the point he passed away,
Oh, yeah.
or was it already done?
No, we sat with him for a long afternoon. I mean, I don't think anybody really did we sit with. You know, if you do get someone like Tom or Brian Wilson, you get your camera ready, get your questions ready. You don't ask for day two.
That was one day.
No. One day.
Well, I think we're going to go eat some food, which would be a good thing.